our historian emeritus, who does our newsletter. Give her a hand for that.
I thought there was a microphone, but there isn't, but I think I've got a loud voice. I first learned about John Appleyard years ago when he wrote the book about the settlement of Pensacola. And I don't remember the name of the book, John, and I looked for it and I couldn't find it.
DeLuna.
DeLuna, okay. Well, the only thing is, though, I hold a grudge against him because I read the book and for years I totally accepted everything he said as being the absolute truth. And the one thing that I always thought was an interesting part was that Philip of Spain had a thing for what's his name? Tristan DeLuna's wife, and that's why he was chosen for that mission to come here in Pensacola. And for all those years until, 6 months ago, I thought that was real. And then I asked him, and he said, I asked him if that was real, because he didn't go into it in his speech. And he said, no. And I said, well, why did you put it in? And he said, my wife told me that if I didn't put something sexy in there, I wouldn't sell a cup. So I've forgiven him for that, but I think his book was a bestseller, because at the time, I know I bought several myself and gave him as gifts. Anyway, John is a part of our whole community, and we claim him. However, he was born in Chicago, and he attended Northwestern University, and those of you that know about Northwestern know that they only have the very brightest. And then Oxford University, and then graduated from the University of Delaware. He was honored with a doctorate in humane letters from the University of West Florida. And in 1958, he was assigned as director of the Florida Pensacola Quadricentennial, and from that beginning, in his use of radio, television, civic meetings, and other placements to be a storyteller, bringing a variety of tales of this area's past. And I don't think there's anybody in the world who knows the Pensacola Bay area any better than John Appleyard. And we're very grateful to have him as a part of our community, as well as to be on Earth with us for a while longer. Thank you.
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for those glorious words. I was sitting here listening carefully, and I was just disappointed when it appeared that she was about through. I thought she could, but she didn't.
Even I can hush sometimes.
Well, let me say that it's a great pleasure for me and a privilege to join with you here at your meeting this evening. I congratulate you for the kinds of things that you do as a historical society. We're fortunate in that more and more people, as a percentage of our population, are now becoming more interested in our community's past. And they evidence that by what they do, what they go to see, and what they ask about. And as a result, it's a privilege to me to be asked to come and tell a story to you this evening. And I thought I would begin by telling you how the story began. There was a group of men locally here who were very interested in doing for Pensacola what they were doing, having happened from places like Charleston and Williamsburg and places like that, where those communities were utilizing historical background as a magnet for tourism. Pensacola had never done that. And the men came together, and the story is that they gathered, they said, well, now, what we have to do, but bear in mind, these are 20 men who have no basic business in tourism. They're flying blind in this. They said, well, how should we do this? Do we need some sort of a magic number or a figure of some sort? And one man said, yes, and I think I've got just the man. He said, I have in my hand here a little biographical sketch of Tristan DeLuna y Ariana. Well, the other 19 men looked around and said, who in the world was he? And so my friend Justin Waddell said, well, let me tell you a little bit of the story of who this man was and how he became associated with us here. And his year, of course, was 1559. Well, the men said, well, this sounds like a decent idea, let's try it. And they did, and so the very first year, they had their first celebration in 1950. And to epitomize this, they decided what they would do was to select some men from the youth community each year to represent DeLuna. I would add that that man was supposed to have sufficient means, that's a good word, sufficient means so that he would help back the sponsorship of the program with his dollars. And ever since that time, this is 1950 now, ever since that time, that has been the case. Ladies, I've noticed we have a majority of you charming ladies in our audience here this evening. So I must tell you, it is with regret that I point out that having a man as Don Tristan DeLuna has kept ladies from having the chief role in each year's fiesta. But the fiesta has gone on, and it is done, and it is getting a little larger each year. And so I urge you here in Gulf Breeze to take advantage of that. Well, now, the story of Don Tristan DeLuna is unique. He is a man that basically, no matter where we would go outside of our community, if I would drop the name, there wouldn't be a soul who had the slightest idea who he was, what he did, where he came from, and how in the world did they select him? Well, the group in 1950 were looking for someone who could be managed as an image. This man had done a noble thing in coming here. And the question first was, well, why did he come? We're talking about now 1950, and then his date, of course, is 1559. Why? What was going on in the world? Well, let me give you just a couple of quick blips here so that we can place him chronologically. Don Tristan DeLuna arrived in Pensacola at almost the same time that Elizabeth was being crowned Queen of England. That'll probably give you a pretty good fix because she's had considerable publicity. The name has had publicity considerably since then. DeLuna was a figure who fit well into what Spain was trying to do at this time. Now, just in very brief terms, we all followed the 4 voyages of Christopher Columbus, beginning in 1492 and ending early in the next century. And we have an idea that he was sent for a purpose. And the purpose was that Spain by then, and once again we pick on 1492, by then Spain had already put down good economic roots in Central America and South America. North America, they didn't know it was here at that point, but nonetheless, the Spanish were here, and by the time we get to the middle of that century, people were coming to the Viceroy in Mexico City, telling him, look, we're getting reports that there's another whole half continent up there. It's about time that we do something. And so, with a little sponsorship help, the Viceroy selected Don Tristan DeLuna to become the explorer. And basically, that is what DeLuna was. He set out, he sailed with 13 vessels. It was a fairly large group, 13 vessels, and about 1,550 men, women, and children. And he was headed for what they now knew was there. That was North America. As far as actually knowing where he was going, what his target was, what his landfall, he didn't know. He was going on his own, and with 1,550 people, Don Tristan went through the mechanics. He had a very unfortunate sailing because they no sooner set sail from Veracruz when the winds went in the wrong direction, they blew him east across the Atlantic, then blew him back west again. And you can imagine by the time they reached what was to become Pensacola, the ships were getting a little weary. Not to say anything about the people. Well, John Tristan arrived. The fleet arrived. And of those of you who may have had the discomfort of reading my novel on him, basically they arrived getting ready to put people down. They were at the point where this whole group had been on board ship now for about 3 weeks. They were tired. The kids were running around. And what can we? So John Tristan said, "What we're going to do, instead of doing what the book says we should do, we're not going to immediately begin unloading the vessels. We're going to give everybody 4 days off. Let people go on land. Let them see what their new country is going to be like. Let the kids splash around in the water. Have a good time. Then we'll get busy and we'll start unloading the ships." His second in command was a man by the name of Juan Saran Saavedra. And Juan came to him and said, "No, boss, look at how the king looks, this sort of thing. That's why they wrote the book. We're supposed to start unloading right this minute, because there have been cases in the past where failure to do that was something of a mistake." John Tristan said, "No, I know that. But look around. The weather is absolutely gorgeous. Let the police folks get off, splash around, and do so." And they did. Of course, there was no Holiday Inn for them to get into. They were going to just spend the night lying down on the ground doing what they could do. About 4 o'clock in the morning, John Tristan's boss, that is the Admiral Arias, who was in command of the 13 ships, began to hear rain pitter-pattering against the bulkhead of his ship. And he got up and looked around and he said, "Oh my, this isn't so good." He said, "Well now, John Tristan, I know you've sent a few of the people on shore to have fun, but I think you and I better get dressed, go ashore, to show that, leaders ought to be with their people when this kind of trouble comes along." And Tristan said, "Fine, let's go." So the little boat took them in, and they hadn't been there about a couple of hours, and the wind began to pick up. And I have to tell you a side story on this. When I started researching this project, I went to the original archives and to see how they described the storm. And I read what they said about the terrible winds and so forth. Now, I've been here a number of years. I've been through several small hurricanes. I thought, they're just blowing smoke on this one. But then another year later came Hurricane Ivan, and I was convinced that whoever put that on paper knew exactly what had happened, because it did. Well, if you've read the book, you know the story. There were hundreds of people on shore. About 400 of them perished in that storm on land, not in the water. All of those who remained as seamen on the vessels were lost, because all but one vessel went to the bottom. So you can see this was not a fun and games happening. But basically what had happened, there were several hundred on land, and as a consequence, work could begin on starting a settlement of some sort. And it did. Now, when I say that, say it that way, the gentleman back there in the back room is going to say, "Now wait a minute, tell me where it is, I want to go take a look at it tomorrow." Well, the answer is that what their original thought was to go ahead and start was made when they didn't realize that their ships, their vessels were gone. And of course the vessels are gone, the pots and the pans and all the things that they were going to. So here were these people on land, and the Tristan DeLuna story is basically one of seeking survival. They were wise, they were smart, because DeLuna had done a very good research job, taking into consideration the writings of 3 other explorers who had passed through this area in times earlier, about 30 years before his actual expedition. The 2 of them Two of them had gone north. One of them was Hernando de Soto, whose name, of course, would be familiar to. And de Soto had come upon an Indian tribe of some size right in the center of what we now call Alabama. These were the Coosa Indians. Those of you who are alumni of Alabama will recognize Coosa right away because the later generations put named a county for them. But the Coosa Indians were there, and of course the first thing that these surviving settlers did was, let's see what we can find that will help us. We haven't got our own pots and pans, and of course we haven't planted anything, so there's no food here. And those of us who live here realize that the trees and bushes don't exactly come in abundance of the things you would eat. So basically they put together a small committee, a small team that was put in charge of a third in command of the DeLuna expedition. His name was Mateo del Sauz, S-A-U-Z. And Mateo said, well, basically his word was, De Soto had said there was an Indian tribe somewhere. DeLuna said, look, we're here on land, we're in desperate shape. Your job is to find them and see what happens. Well, if you stop and think about it, here was this little team of half a dozen men on their horses starting off. They had no idea in the world where they were going, what they might expect. But once again, that part of the story has a very happy finish to it, because they're on the trail about 2 days, and sure enough, they come upon a little outreach of the Coosa Indians. It was on what we would today call the Alabama River. It was the Indians had a name for it, and I'll bet you never heard this one before. Nanacapana. Nanacapana was there. That was the Indian village, and the Indians they welcomed these white men. Thought, this is sort of cool. What can we do? They got along fine. So as a result of that, a messenger was sent back to DeLuna, and the word next was to try and make a march, not to Little Nanacapana, because that's an outreach. It's a suburb. But to try and find the true Coosa tribe center. And of course, the people from Nanacapana were there to help them. So they start off through the woods from here. Now, I want you to just think in terms of what we're going with. On the DeLuna expedition had about 1,550 people. Some of them had died in the storm, but some of those people were women. There were a few children. Now you're going to just think of it. Starting off, you're not quite sure where you're going, and you sure haven't got any idea of how you're going to get there. But you start off, you're moving now from what DeLuna's people called Oshus, O-C-H-U-S-E. We're Oshus here now, Gulf Breeze / Oshus. They started, and it took them about 2 weeks stumbling around in the wilderness, and this advanced team did find Coosa. Well, everybody's tickled to death with this. The question is, can we get along with these people? After all, here we are, we're a team of a dozen or so cavalrymen, and we're here, and we're making friends with these people. Now, what they don't know, of course, is that we've got about 1,100 people back on the beach, and we're hoping to bring them here for the winter. Now, that's a kind of a tough ask if you can think it through. So basically, they spend several days getting acquainted with the Coosas. And one of the things they did, and I love the story, the way the archives tell it. But one of the things they decided that they had to do right off, this was part of their mission. That was to bring the holy faith to the Indians. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, they start to do a little bit here, a little bit, and finally they come to a Sunday morning. Bear in mind, we're still in this first week of this advanced team. And, all right, let's do this right. We've got Domingo de Santo Domingo, one of the friars is with them. We will conduct a regular holy high mass right here under the trees to show these people. Well, everybody said, well, can't hurt, let's try it. And so they do. They go forward, and the steps go 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm not a Catholic, so I'm probably going to get this all wrong. But at a key point in the service, there is the introduction of the chalice with the wine. And so basically, these folks are going through the same routine. They put the chalice here. The Indians are sitting out here watching. And they're pretty impressed. They think, yeah, this is a pretty good show these folks are putting on. But here's the chalice here. And then right in the middle of this, in this story, as they're sitting there looking forward, they begin to see not a gnat, help me out, I need
Spider?
Spider?
I need a moth or something like that coming down from a tree on a web. It's coming down, down, down. Well, of course, the Indians are watching this saying, this is exciting. What kind of a show is this? The Spanish over there said, what do we do? If we get up and swat it away, it's going to break the spell of the whole mass. What do we do? So it comes down, down, down straight for the cup and settles down right on the lip of the cup itself. And after a second or two, it falls off dead. Well, the Indians are impressed. They come in, one looks to the other, these guys have got pretty good magic, haven't they? Pretty good. But anyway, they are impressed. Now, I think the way you're looking at me, you're saying he's not telling this isn't true at all. But it is. Because what I'm telling you are the stories that were recorded in the archives and are present today in Madrid. If you want to go over there and take a look, it's the story is there. Anyway, the Indians are impressed. So they gather together, and finally one of Mateo del Sal's, the lieutenant, DeLuna's the lieutenant, says, now, here's our problem. Said, we're here, you've been so nice to us, but now we've got DeLuna down here 200 miles away. We probably can't find our way back to find him, but what we need is to get your approval to bring that whole troop here so that they'll have something to eat for the winter. Otherwise, well, there's no way we're going to get back to Mexico unless we walk. And so the Indians say, give it a try. And so basically the first, I guess we would call them teams, these DeLuna men make their way forward. And well, I won't go through the whole 17 yards of what happens to them. They have every misadventure you can think of. Because bear in mind that we're going from the beach into the center of Alabama, and really they haven't the slightest idea where they're going, except that they know a couple of their buddies have stumbled into this Indian village. Well, the first of them get there, and things go very smoothly. At that point in time, luck turns to DeLuna's people. Bear in mind, the bulk of them are still down on the beach. They're feeding, how they're feeding the oyster crop must have been very good that day. But nonetheless, they were surviving. And then on a given morning, one of their lieutenants steps down to the beach. Had no particular reason to go, but he looked off to the west, and here coming at him are half a dozen Spanish galleons. He can't believe it. He says, I must be dreaming. So he rushes back and gets one of his assistants and came back. That's it. You're right. And here they come. And basically the galleons go forward. The leadership comes ashore. They are, of course, reunited with DeLuna at once. And they stand there. And DeLuna, of course, can't believe that this is happening because he had no idea they were coming. Basically, so now the question is, in his mind, can I use the resources that these people are coming, or are bringing, put together our whole campaign, and start over again, start marching to Coosa? Well, he goes to Saran Saavedra and said, what do you think of this? Saran said, I think you've been out in the sun too long. Look at your people. They're tired. They've been without food. You can't ask them to go one more step. DeLuna said, I think I'm going to try. So I'll tell you what let's do. Let's say this. We'll agree that I will try to find 25 men who are willing to stay here with me now and start what we were going to do in full. The rest can get on the galleons and go back. The man said, well, okay, but make it 50. So DeLuna starts, and he goes from man to man. You said okay, you said okay. Basically, he's getting his group pretty well together when, what wouldn't you know would happen? Now on comes another storm of size. This isn't another Ivan or anything like that, but it's bad enough to discourage those people who might have settled in there. They're saying, now wait, what kind of a place is this? Is this sort of thing going to happen every 3 weeks? So basically, at this point, we are now basically we're now about four months into the DeLuna arrival story, and the agreement is there that they will get on the galleons and go back. So one group after another does this. And DeLuna himself says, I'm going to see if I can find 10 men who will stay with me. And he finds them, but then the second in command says, boss, look at what you're doing. Does this make any sense? When will any other relief come to you here? You have no idea. What will the viceroy say when we bring this story back? And DeLuna finally agrees that he is sort of blowing up in a storm. And so after being these men, these Spaniards, having been here about 4 months, they get on the galleons and they depart. And as they do that, you can almost see DeLuna's standing on the deck, looking back, looking at this beautiful area that they were in, thinking of the things that he had dreamed about, and he says, the Lord just wasn't working with me. I guess that was it. The long and the short of it was, of course, the expedition, all the people on those vessels returned to Veracruz. They are greeted there, and they are given certain honors for what they tried to do. And DeLuna, of course, immediately goes to the viceroy and says, now, if with your permission and with your approval, let's try to put together 50 men, put them on ships, let me take them back. And the viceroy says, I do not have authorization. This is government work at its best. The viceroy says, I'm sorry, I don't have a budget for this. We can't do it. So I'm going to have to ask you to go back to Central America and then back to Spain and present your story. And that's what DeLuna does. DeLuna goes back, he talks to the leaders in Mexico City, and of course they say, well, it's a pretty interesting story, but this sounds familiar to modern day parlance, you'd get an idea. Said, we really don't have authorization to do that, but why don't you get you're on the vessel here, go back to Spain and get to talk to the king and queen and see what they say. And DeLuna does. And all I can say in winding up our tale is that the rest of DeLuna's life, he tries to find some way to justify what happened to him. The storm, all that went with it, he said, well, it could have happened to anybody. That was an act of God. I couldn't control that, but it did happen. And as a result, the 1559 story ended that way. No one remained, and it was 140 years until the Spanish, out of Mexico, sent another expedition to these shores on the north side of the Gulf of Mexico. That's the story of Don Andres de Arreola. And if you are terribly hard up for programs, I'd be delighted to come back someday and tell you that Areola has a little better luck than DeLuna did. But nonetheless, you know, today, it's interesting to me that this group of 20 men thinking about how we can put together some sort of festival to draw people to Pensacola, how they happened to find DeLuna, and how they researched it. You credit a man by the name of Justin Waddell, who was the one who knew, had a pretty good background on this, and he did his hard work. And then people, the university wasn't here then, so we couldn't call on them for help. But nonetheless, that's the DeLuna story. That's what almost might have been, but it just didn't work out. DeLuna himself, the charming lady who introduced me said that I played games with DeLuna's wife, and there's some of that in the book. You know what? She's right. My wife did say exactly that. We wrote this small part into there, and she was right. That sold a few books. So, in any event, we look back now on the DeLuna story, because in 1949 and 50, a committee of 20 men sat in a room down at the Chamber of Commerce, and their assignment was to find some vehicle that Pensacola could use as an attraction, bringing people here on vacation. And this is, after study, John Tristan was what they came up with, and they began it. And to this day, this is now 60 years later, we still have not got John Tristan in the history books or any place else where people will read about it. But in any case, in case you had any doubts, he was very real, just as I've told you the story. So let me stop there and see what questions you might have.
Who is responsible for the statue that is down on the waterfront?
A veterans group put the statue together, and they did a very good representation. And he looks like a Spanish conquistador of the era. Bear in mind, the 1950, when all of this was being assembled for Pensacola, cities up and down the East Coast were already doing a very good job of marketing their communities for visitors through history. St. Augustine was certainly the first. That dates from 1965. And they did a first-class job. But if you go to Charleston or some of the other towns along the way, you'll find that they have something like that too. And what our committee here was trying to do was find a suitable character that would fit Pensacola. And a succession of chamber people and others have struggled on with this. I wish I could honestly say that people in the publishing business or otherwise might have picked up on using DeLuna in some of their things. I will tell you quite honestly, I've tried without a whole lot of success. But in any event, that's it. Now, any other questions?
So none of the people stayed in the middle of Alabama?
None of the people stayed. No, they all came back.
Justin Waddell, can you tell me what he did here in Pensacola, who he's with, and maybe some of the other men that worked with him?
Justin was a man of a marketing guru. He had worked for two major companies in New York as a marketing specialist. Then he had been assigned in London for a couple of years. He came back and was with St. Regis Paper Company and was sent here to be the marketing man for them here. And it was he that got involved with the committee and did the initial research that found DeLuna. Now, I worked with Justin very carefully, and I wish I could say, well, he went right to here, and here, and that's where he got it. But I couldn't honestly tell you that, because I don't think that was the case. Any others?
When the group from DeLuna's expedition went into Alabama looking for the natives, and how did they communicate with them?
I'm not sure I got the question.
Okay, however. When the explorers, DeLuna's group, went into Alabama looking for the natives,
Yes.
how did they communicate with them?
I think the answer has to be with great difficulty. No, basically, here we are with our 30 folks here tonight. We're now appointed to to carry the explorations forward. And we're going to go in, where will we go? We're going to central Mississippi, somewhere around Hattiesburg. We're going to try and make our mission known to the people there. Think what it would have been like. We're speaking our language. Mississippi's is a little different, so we have to count on it. Any others?
Of the ships that originally came, did they recover any of them? Did they find them?
I'm sorry?
I think you said there were 15 ships.
Oh, very, very good. I'm glad you asked that. The vessels, of the vessels that were here, one was immediately sent back to Mexico, reporting that everything was fine. They had gotten here just fine. All the others in the storm sank. And yes, the answer is the archaeologists from the university have found 2 of the ships. They're right out.
I thought one survived and was blown inland, and that was the only way they survived.
The only one that survived totally went back to Mexico.
One was salvaged.
I wish I could get all of you to read the book, which is called DeLuna, because you will find, I was floating in total ignorance of this, that where I described the sunken vessels is where the university found them. And we've joked, Dr. Benz and I have joked back and forth on that a lot, because I was shooting in the dark where I thought they ought to be, and doggone if they weren't there. Any others? Yes?
Who was behind the quadricentennial in 1959?
Who was behind the quadricentennial? I'm glad you asked that. I was part of it, as maybe you know, but basically, Florida and Pensacola itself had been looking at what they were doing in Williamsburg and Charleston and other places, trying to see what could be done to put a duplicate of this. And one of the things that they came up with a little bit later was the fact that we were the first colony that could say we were here for 400 years. Now, Virginia, of course, they've got their claims, all of which are great, and but they don't get the 400 years. Both St. Augustine and Pensacola could make the claim at that time that it was made. So it was legitimate, and here we are. The idea of the celebration that we had here in Pensacola, this began with a similar committee. Justin Waddell was still alive and was still a part of that. They went to the governor's office and said, now look, we've got something special here in Pensacola. We want to tell the story of what it was like to bring people here in 1559. And the governors, they sort of hemmed and hawed about it. And others went back, and finally, with about 4 months before the kickoff date would have to be, they finally said, okay, we over there in this closet, we just found $250,000. You can have it. Go ahead with the celebration. And they did, and that's how the whole thing got started. Any others? Well, I was serious on what I said before. If you ever get stuck for a poor program and you want something else on either American history, Spanish history, Pensacola history, there are all kinds of good ones out there, and I'd be happy to come back and join you. So thank you very much for having me.